So Carol and Hai-Ying asked me to talk about a topic that's probably quite a bit different than what you've been hearing this morning or throughout the rest of this workshop and tomorrow. And instead of giving you a bunch of content related to soil health, they asked me to talk about what are the opportunities for funding specifically for on-farm research related to soil health and a couple of other things that they asked me to throw in. So that's my goal in the next 20 minutes or so, is give you a picture of a couple of programs that you can actually access either directly as a producer or as an ag professional that works with producers. So before I get into that, I'm going to kind of step back and talk a little bit about the Center for Sustaining Ag and Natural Resources and why we've been invested in the soil health space. For many years, the center's existed since 1992. I don't know how many years that is now, almost 30. And the purpose of the center was really to focus on sustainability issues, research and extension and education in agriculture in Washington State. And over time, soil health became a really big, one of kind of call it the top 3 priorities within the center. And after several years of talking about soil health, we decided we really needed to distill down and figure out what exactly we wanted to be investing in solving problems in soil health. So we had one of our advisory committee meetings focused on soil health and basically hammered out, if we were to really get down to brass tacks, funding in this area, what should we be investing in? And the top 2 priorities came back from that. The economic value of soil quality, and at that time we were still calling it soil quality. And then the second one was understanding the relationship between soil biological activity and disease pressure. There were a number of other topics, and the task force report is actually available if you want to go back and read that. But really those 2 things, does it pay for the farmer to do something? And then what's this relationship in the biology, both the good and the bad, and how that relates to how plants grow. So then kind of following that, and I'll come back around to this and close it at the end talking about the Soil Health Initiative for the state. But we held a summit in 2018 with a different group of people, but actually some of it had crossover and really focused again on if we were going to make a major investment in the region in soil health, what things should we really nail down on it? And the options that came out of a 2-day workshop here in Pullman a couple years ago were we needed a lot more information on diagnostic tools and tests that were specific for our region and cropping systems. We needed some more help translating the research into implementation. We needed a roadmap, and I'll come back and talk about that again, so that if we're spending money, we know that at the end of a decade of investment, we're going to get somewhere. And this understanding soil biology, ecology, and plant-soil interactions came up again. And then as you heard from Dave Huggins this morning, doing a lot of this in a long-term experimental environment was really important. Okay, so since that 2014 meeting, we've been spending a whole bunch of money on soil health, and we have a program called BioAg, or Biologically Intensive and Organic Agriculture, that was funded by the legislature, which is basically a WSU internal competitive grant program where we help faculty get initiated on various different research projects or education extension projects to work on new things or new ideas. And one of the things that we've always focused on is a prioritization of things that matter to the producers in our state, so that when this research results in outcomes that can be implemented, it actually makes change in the state. And I'll send this back to, or make sure that Hai-Ying and Carol have this so you can go click on these projects and actually see what's been done. But notably, 2014 to 2016, several research projects were initiated related to soil health. And then 2017 to 2019, we've actually had even more initiated related to soil health. So there's a lot of work that's been done. A lot of that's actually dryland production systems relevant, and you need to be accessing that information. A lot of the publications have started to come out from this, and I think a lot of what we're really beginning to understand that you're even hearing in this workshop, some of those ideas were kind of pushed along by some investment here with BioAg money. And then the last thing I'll talk about before I get into the programs that are specific to what you can go into is through the REACH project, which many of you are aware of, we published this this book, Advances in Dryland Farming in the Inland Pacific Northwest, a couple years ago, and many of the chapters are actually related to soil health. If you have not received a copy of this book, there's about 20 left, so catch me today and I'll get your name and address and we'll get one to you. Okay, so amongst the several official jobs I actually have an unofficial job that I'm the Western SARE coordinator for Washington State. For those of you from Idaho, there's actually an Idaho coordinator as well. And the Western SARE program is a USDA grant program that's broken up regionally, and our region is the Western region, which is the largest region, reaches clear down to the South Pacific in terms of where the locations are. But this program was designed in the 80s for research and extension education opportunities. It's really farmer directed and farmer focused. And if you haven't heard of this, I'd encourage you to take some time, Google Western SARE, get on their website. Similar to the BioAg program, there's links to all the past projects that have been funded. The Administrative Council for Western SARE has actually been chaired by Carl Coopers for several years. I think he did it in two sequences. So if you know Carl, he had a lot of input and influence on the direction of the program. But there's basically 5 different types of grants that you can get through Western SARE now. The top one, the Research and Education Program grants, they're up to $350,000 for up to a 3-year proposal. These are really focused on scientists who will work with you, with producers in terms of getting research projects going. And we're really successful in this area, Washington State and the Northwest. We're really successful at tapping this program. And one of the keys to the program is there has to be legitimate farmer input into the proposal. And the Administrative Council reviews these, and if they don't, Administrative Council is 60% farmers. If they don't think or see that this is something that farmers really care about, the proposal has no chance of getting funded. The second one is the Professional Development Program grants. These are up to $75,000. Generally speaking, what this program is really designed to do is it's designed to help extension, conservation district staff, commercial, fertilizer reps, things like that, get new information delivered to them so that they can go and deliver that to producers. We actually use the Professional Development Program. We got a grant a couple years ago, Leslie in the back, when she was with the Conservation District, we partnered together and got one for a workshop last March in Pendleton called the Healthy Soils, Healthy Region Workshop, where the idea was all this information that you're hearing today, we wanted to get that out to the Conservation District staff and other extension people in the region so they knew what the latest and greatest was. The next two I'm going to jump and talk a little bit more specifically about because these are the programs that you can access directly. And then the last one is the grad student grants in sustainable agriculture. So let's talk about the Farmer Rancher Grant. And this is straight off the Western SARE website. No trick, no special information here. There's also a webinar series posted on the website where you can actually learn more about what these are, how to successfully put in a proposal. So the Farmer Rancher Grant Program involves agricultural producers. You are the main applicant. And a technical advisor or advisors, and you have to have one. And you're implementing a project to address identified needs in sustainable agriculture. Couple of key things you're going to want to know about this. Number one, you're getting federal grant money. There is some accountability to it. So it's not like they're just giving you money and you can do whatever you want to do. You actually have to have all the kinds of technical things that the university has to have when we submit a federal grant for contracting. So there's some hoops to jump through, and you can't wait to the last minute in order to put those pieces together, or you won't be able to apply. It's currently closed, but it will open next year again. Usually it remains open until August, or from August to November, and then sometime in January they review it. And you hear March, April-ish, so hopefully right before the growing season. Another important factor, this is a grant, you're going to have to cash flow the grant. I think this is a really important message. As a lot of producers have taken these and then realized, oh wow, I have to cash flow the grant. I have to work for 3 months, spend my own money, and then invoice and show that I've got deliverables before now it's Montana State will actually reimburse me for the money that I've spent. So a really important thing to consider, it's not just, $75,000 that you can go get and it's free money. So, but it can be a very, very valuable thing for you to access. It is expected that the outcome of funded project will result in quantifiable benefits for producers, increase the preservation of natural and social resources upon which agriculture relies, and be shared with other producers. So if you've ever gotten an NRCS EQIP contract or something like that where you really are the beneficiary, that's a little bit of a different thing than this is. The purpose of this program, of course, you're going to benefit directly as the applicant and the person who gets the grant, but the intent is for the broader benefit. So this is not necessarily to buy you a piece of equipment or a piece of conservation tillage or practice or something like that. This is so you can conduct research that you then will turn and share with the other producers that work in similar systems to you, and they will expect you to do things like field days and other things to invite other producers to actually participate in that. There's actually a field day webinar and resource kit around how you can do that kind of thing, so you don't have to kind of create this all on your own the first time. It does help to have multiple producers together in these as an applicant. One of you would have to be named as the applicant and be responsible for all the contracting and billing. But it does help to have a group, a team, and that really helps to solidify it, and it helps to have actions across state lines. So if there's an Oregon, Idaho, Washington team of producers and a team of technical advisors, that increases the potential that you're going to be successful and get awarded the program. Last couple of things. Many of the people that have presented or that that work at the universities have accessed the Western SARE program. They have a lot of insight into how to do this. They'd be great technical advisors. Seek out the person that you think has the interest or local, location based that would work with you. Okay, the next one is called the Professional Plus Producer Grant. So this is kind of flip that around. Instead of the producer being the applicant, in this case, someone in the ag professional circle is the applicant. So who is an ag professional? That could be, a researcher, it could be an extension person, it could be a conservation district person, it could be a private sector commercial rep. But it's someone who has a research skill set, and usually a documented research skill set. They have a graduate degree or something like that and conducts research. But in this case, they're the applicant and they're the person that kind of has to deal with all the contracting, or their entity has to deal with all the contracting. But it still works basically the same way. This is producer focused. The technical person may be kind of running the grant, but it still should operate basically the same way. That this should be something that producers are prioritizing and moving forward with. Same kind of thing. Expected to have quantifiable benefits for producers, result in good things on the landscape, and shared with other producers. So they're basically the same program. The only difference is who's the applicant and thus who's accountable and responsibility for the funding management and the deliverables and contracting. So I'm going to stop right there for a moment. Are there any questions on the SARE programs? Okay. Before this, how many of you knew these existed? Okay, so several of you did know these exist. Last comment before I move on and talk about the Soil Health Initiative is we are very successful in this region when we put in applications for this program. We don't put a lot of applications in for the program. So many states around the region do better than us because they simply put in more proposals. So if you have a good idea, or you're talking with a researcher or an extension agent or your chemical dealer, think about this program as something that you can actually implement. So just a comment, Jim Moyer this morning was telling me that now that he's retired, he's back to being a farmer, and they've been doing a whole bunch of on-farm research on their operation in Dayton. He'd be a perfect applicant for this. Okay. Hi, Ian.
So what is the success rate for those two programs?
You know, I don't have an answer to that, but I can get it to you. Generally speaking, the SARE program overall success rate is about 25%, but I think these are a little higher. And, you know, we're also very willing to kind of pre-review your proposals, give you feedback, so that if you have an idea and you want to see, you know, what's the chances I'm going to be successful, or pointers on how to make your proposal better, contact us. Contact us early to give you a chance to review your idea, review the actual documents before they get packaged and sent in. Okay? All right, so I'm going to shift directions a little bit and talk about the Soil Health Initiative. I think one of my perhaps greatest skills is sometimes I'm just flat out lucky, and I happen to be in the right place at the right time. And I didn't think it used to be a skill, but now I'm beginning to think it's a skill because it happens frequently enough. So Derek Sandison, the Director of Agriculture in the state of Washington, invited me along with a group of people from the Skagit to come down about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, wow, it's getting there, to talk and report to the governor as part of the Results Washington process. And the topic of the conversation was preserving ag land, because the state's Results Washington strategy is no net loss of agricultural acres. In fact, it actually wants to increase them. We get in there, and 2 minutes into like a 90-minute presentation that we had all queued up, the governor interrupts and says, I want to talk about soil health instead. And so I was the one person in the room that everybody turned and looked to and said, you answer his questions. And he had several questions, and you can actually go watch this on TVW and see me under the kind of squirming there as I'm responding to him. But basically his question is, do we know where we're at relative to soil health in the state of Washington? And lo and behold, he tells us he just read David Montgomery's book on soil, or on dirt. And he just talked to David Montgomery a couple of days before, so this is why it was fresh on his mind. And so we had a conversation that, you know, we do know some things, but there's a lot of things that we simply just don't know yet. The closer you are to Pullman and Moscow, the more we actually know. The further away you are, the less we know. Some cropping systems and regions, we actually don't know anything because we haven't had a soil scientist working in this. And so at the end of this kind of rabbit trail, you know, he said, okay, thank you, and we went back to our presentation, and then he interrupted again later on, came back to the soil health question, and he says, I'm really concerned about soil health. I think we should do something about it. There's an opportunity here. Basically, what that left us with is, oh wow, he's inviting some kind of a, you know, presentation of a plan for soil health. We need to go back and sit down and think about what this would actually look like. So that's why we held the summit in February of 2 years ago, is to really build out a game plan for soil health. And so the Washington Soil Health Initiative, it's a university agency industry partnership. WSDA, State Department of Agriculture, State Conservation Commission, and Conservation Districts are the other two institutional partners. And then several industry groups, including wheat industry, potatoes, tree fruit, berries, and some others have really been supportive of this, trying to come forward to make a request for funding for kind of a massive initiative, statewide, comprehensive, to get us somewhere on soil health. And so we put forth a plan that is basically a soil health long-term agroecological research and extension network with the three institutions, and we have a lot of material on this. You kind of have the 2020 flyer on your table. But the idea here was to take the Cook Farm concept and spread that across the state with some long-term experimental investments, a few sites that would get kind of more significant investment, but then a number of other sites that could have basically operate as satellite investments. We also had a realization or an understanding there's a lot of work already going on, and what we need to do simply is coordinate it better and invest in it to make sure that we can sustain some of this effort and build it. And so we request money for these long-term sites, We request more money for innovative seed funding and technical assistance. So the BioAg program that I talked about, we funded a lot of projects in soil health, but every time we run this, there's a whole lot more we don't fund. And so we knew if we could get a little bit more kind of grease money to get new ideas going across the state, that would really be helpful. There are a few specific faculty lines that we built into it, including the Washington State Department of Agriculture Soil Health lead, who's now sitting in the back of the room, and also some technical staffing in order to make this whole thing play out. And the real goal was kind of threefold. You know, for the farmer, that cost-benefit equation and some of these answers that you want around what happens when I invest in these practices, how does it return to me, how do I be profitable doing this, what are the other benefits that I care about, really getting good answers across the state to that. Some of the environmental quality variables, carbon sequestration, reduce sediment and nutrient export to water, reduce greenhouse gases, things that we're pretty sure the governor, the reason he's interested in this are these environmental qualities. And then to really get robust with the production of information and the extension of information on this topic out there. There's also another angle on this that we're kind of interested in, and that is what's the potential for kind of a longer term link between soil health, soil management, crop and food quality and nutrition as that relates to the human health question. So we've got some work that's starting to tease out in that area. Okay, so this is just an image of, we've got more going on than this, but the idea is there's kind of multiple long-term sites, a perennial cropping system site in the interior part of the state, an annual cropping system site in the interior of the state, a mixed system in western Washington, and then a number of other kind of satellite sites around there to really cover our cropping systems and our region. Okay, so last thing I'm going to tell you kind of where is this at right now. Last session we submitted the whole package as about a $1.7 million a year package to the legislature. All three entities have pieces of that. So WSU has a piece, the Department of Ag has a piece, and the commission and districts have a piece. Last year, we got $250,000 a year for 2 years, just WSU, basically to get the thing rolling and do a couple of pieces of the puzzle. So first of all is help getting the baseline information around where are we at with soil health in the state. WSDA kicked in a $500,000 specialty crop grant to help us really get that rolling, but that money can only be used in the specialty crops. So we're trying to kind of cover the state, collect the data that we don't have, the data that we do have, put it all together, really get a good baseline of where we're at so we can measure against it. The second piece of that is the road mapping process. So where do we want to be in 10 years? Really work with producers at a local area cropping systems level as well as kind of an overall level with the bigger picture questions, and really distill down what are the things that we want to know and be able to implement and change on the landscape 10 years from now so that we can work backwards and make sure our investments over that 10 years get us to that point. And then the third piece, that's going forward. The third piece was we wanted to start these long-term sites, but the plan was to start those in the third year. That'll just keep doing that. Let's set that down. Plan was to start those in the third year, but the way the legislature worked, they decided you're going to start the site in Mount Vernon right away. And so we actually don't have quite enough money to do everything that we're supposed to do with what they gave us, but we're making a good effort to try and get that Mount Vernon site up and going. Just so happens that Senator Leas, who is just south of Mount Vernon, was the one that actually put it in the budget, and so he told us to start that site. We are going back to the legislature to request this again in this session. WSDA is included in the governor's budget. Their ask is included in the governor's budget. WSU and the commission were not this time, but we are going to ask, we're all asking in the legislative session for the whole package. So we'll see where it goes. Tomorrow, about 26 hours from now, I'm testifying in front of the Senate Ag Committee on this topic. So, okay, so with that, any questions?
Do you know anything about the Farms and Fields bill?
Okay. Yeah, so question, there's a bill, another bill called Sustainable Farms and Fields that's being run by a group called Carbon Washington. Last session, kind of nobody really knew this was coming, and right at kind of a critical point when the Soil Health Initiative was in discussion, that bill was dropped and created a little bit of confusion. We didn't, there was confusion. Is this the same thing? Is it not the same thing? What is this? And no one really understood that, and it kind of, I think it probably hurt both options at the same time. That bill has also been dropped, so there are two bills that have language in them related to soil health. One of them is the Soil Health Initiative bill. The other one is the Carbon Washington Sustainable Farms and Fields bill. My understanding of it is I was in a meeting a week or so ago on where that is, and of course this could change quite a bit, is essentially a bill that would create a bucket for funding for on-farm implementation of soil health practices. The real focus is on getting carbon sequestration or other carbon footprint reductions on farm. And so that's what that bill is. I don't think that there's any specifics around funding for that bill. This is really just to create an opportunity for money to be actually pushed through to the producer level. It would, at some level it'd be really nice and dovetail if we can figure out answers to questions, and there'd be money that would probably work somewhat similar to EQIP or other kinds of programs, but it would be a state pool of funding. So any other questions on that one? I think we're going to be coordinated a little bit better this session so that the two don't confuse each other in the legislature. Question?
So in proper political wording, can you state what growers might be able to do if they're interested in soil health?
Yeah, so obviously we're making a request to the legislature. This is going to be a very difficult session. We're told that. There's some transportation funding issues in Washington that have to be worked out that probably take priority over everything. But we do know that there's probably strong support in the Senate for the initiative. House might be a little bit harder to get through, but certainly work through your associations. You can always, send a message to your legislator or senator that you're interested in supporting this. If you do have questions, maybe that's where I could go back here. Technical questions on what's in the initiative, you can send those to me. You can send them to Rich Koenig or Scott Hulbert. There must be some animation in that slide. If you have technical questions for WSDA or policy questions, Kelly McLean, though her father just passed away, so she's out of the office, so Evan Scheffels right now is a point person there. Allison Halpern with Conservation Commission. And then if you have policy questions or political questions on the WSU side, Colleen Kerr or Chris Mulick from Government Relations. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Chad, who's leading the road mapping for this region?
We are.
Or what's the kind of
So the question is, who's leading the road mapping for this region? What we've done is we've created an internal leadership team that's sorting through that, and members of that leadership team are kind of representative for each of the regions. The Mount Vernon one has started. The others, we're still in the process of working that out, of what that actually will look like. The Mount Vernon one is kind of the guinea pig, so we can learn from that one. And we had to do that one and move it. So we're learning from that one, trying to come back with some lessons learned. But it will be the usual suspects that'll actually be participating. And so part of the dryland region, certainly this group that's here, you'll have your input through that process. Okay. Tabitha.
Just asking questions. I'm curious, Chad, coming from the Idaho side, how are you guys interacting with, Idaho and Oregon, or, kind of what's the political landscape or the soil health, trying to have directed policy, what does that look like from your perspective?
Great question. So Tabitha's question is, how are we coordinating with Idaho and Oregon on this topic? And obviously, for the wheat production systems, there's historically a ton of coordination on the research and extension elements of wheat production systems. And we would build on that. And, so the Healthy Soils, Healthy Region workshop we held last March, we actually was a tri-state thing like we often do. Where Oregon and Idaho are at in terms of specific soil health legislation, I'm not aware of anything really moving. But certainly, if there was something moving in those two states, we would want to partner in and especially eliminate redundancy, make sure that we're complementary. There's quite a bit of capacity at both U of I and OSU, as well as throughout the network. In this space, we'll continue to coordinate at a regional level like we usually do. There's, I think, 20 out of 50 states right now that have some kind of legislative bill either recently passed or under consideration related to soil health. Those range from really simple, $10,000, soil health is important bills to our initiative to some really big kind of funding for on-farm implementation. And so we're trying to get a handle on that, and there's quite a few groups that are trying to get a handle on nationally what's going on and how are these dovetailed, what's similar, what's dissimilar between.